Okay, so I think this is the right time to talk about black movies. And it's funny, it's February the 2nd, and I'm gearing up to do a movie review or some type of commentary on the Black Judas and the Black Messiah that's coming out. I don't know the official date. I think it's the February 12th or something like that. Getting ready to do commentary on that because I saw commentary on the trailer and I was like, nobody read the book. I read the book, so I feel like I can give a little bit better commentary, even though a lot of the commentary without people even reading the book was good. You get what I'm saying? But I feel like I can offer a little bit more just because I read the book. And I'm happy I read the book in 2020 because I didn't think that the movie would come out in 2021. Didn't know it was coming out. I just got more aggressive in my reading back in September 2020, so I started reading a little bit more and trying to read books on my bookshelf because I was like, man, I need to start reading and get more aggressive. I got books on my bookshelf I haven't even touched. And Fred Hampton was one of the books that I think I read halfway but didn't read all the way through. So I actually got to read it all the way through in 2020. And I read a number of other things, books and articles and everything, getting into it. And so I wanted to read about Malcolm X all the way in full, just like I read the Fred Hampton's book all the way in full. But I was so stuck on his oldest daughter, Atala's forward of this version of the Malcolm X's book and the first chapter, and haven't left it yet. I have not gone anywhere from the forward in the first chapter yet because I have to get these videos out about what I know and what I learned just from those two sections of the book alone, because it blew me away. I was like, as I read this stuff at 30, 31 years old, I'm like, how the hell? I guess it just hits me different now at my age. I could totally understand things in a whole new way than what I was when I first read a Fred Hampton story or a Malcolm X story at 20 or 21 or 19 or whatever like that. It just doesn't touch you in the way that it would touch you at 30, 31, 35, or 40 because you lived a little bit more. You see and notice a lot more, so it just hits you in a whole different way. Okay, so his daughter Atala in the forward of this version of the story of Malcolm X's book, because Malcolm X actually was assassinated before his book was even published. Before it was even released, Malcolm X was already assassinated. Malcolm X was assassinated February 21st, 1965. So when you know about his death, him being, murdered that early in that year of 1965, he was not allowed to see a lot of stuff, a lot of different things, or his contributions to the world be, he wasn't able to see his efforts and his contributions, how it touched people, because before Malcolm was killed, nobody wanted to be near him. Even when he died, they couldn't even find a funeral to take his body in. People were afraid to be near him. And Atala talks about that. Atala dropped so many gems in the forward, it's ridiculous. And I wanted to talk about Malcolm's story in at least 3 parts. The movie and how that movie had, from the moment the idea clicked into Marvin Worth's head, Malcolm's teenage friend who had the idea to make his story into a movie. The moment that came into Marvin Worth's head, it was just trials and tribulations for it to come to life in 1992, 1993. Don't hold me to these dates too thick because This is a rough draft video. This is not the polished version of the video of what I want to make. This is a rough draft. So Marvin Worth is a teenage friend of Malcolm X. He wanted to make a movie about Malcolm X's life. And from that moment that he wanted to make this movie, it was just trials and tribulations. It was a lot of pushback. Atala talks about, the long hours and the phone calls and the in-person visits and all of the stuff that Alex Haley went through for the book. And the fact that he was assassinated before the book was even... I don't even think the book was even finished before Malcolm was assassinated. So Malcolm was assassinated, and the book was released, and then Marvin Worth, his childhood friend, wanted to make a movie. He asked Alex Haley, he asked his wife, they agreed. So then he had James Baldwin to write the script, and a man named Arnold Pearl to do a modification of the screenplay. And that was back in 1965. Okay, so how they ended up with Spike Lee as the director back in 1992, I want to know how they got to Spike Lee. And I know that Spike Lee kept the screenplay that James Baldwin wrote, even though James Baldwin wrote the script starting in 1965, but it went through a lot of different writings and a lot of different directors before 1992. And that's why I say, how did they get to Spike? And why did Spike decide to keep Baldwin's version of the screenplay? So that's what I wanted to know. And so it was so crazy that Atala was talking about the trials of this movie coming to life. And then I started doing a little background on Wikipedia. And I don't usually go on Wikipedia for information, but I started reading about how, this is just some Wikipedia information. So it could not be true, which I think most of it is true. You get what I'm saying? So Alex Haley, and this was about Alex Haley going through what he went through for the book. Okay? So Alex Haley was talked about how he went to talk to Malcolm about writing the book. This is 1963. And this was around the time 1963, 1964, when Malcolm was exiled from the Nation of Islam. So he was kicked out the Nation of Islam, or I think it was before he was kicked out. Either or, it was around that time, close before he was exiled. And so Alex Haley was talking about how Malcolm was asking him about his life. Alex asking Malcolm about his life. And Malcolm just so obsessed with the Nation of Islam, just talking about the nation and everything going on in the nation and all of this stuff. And he's like, no, I want to know about you. I want to know about your upbringing. I want to know about your life. I want to know about your mom, your dad, your sisters, your brothers. I want to know about how you got here, how you became this leader that you became. And because every time he would ask Malcolm about himself, he would just talk about the nation. And he was like, look, no, I want to know about you. And Malcolm was like, then he, starts talking about his mother and, everything like that. Before he even got to his mom, he was pissed off at Alex because he's like, I don't want to, frustrated that he didn't want to know about the Nation of Islam, because when Malcolm got with the nation, it became his whole life. He became obsessed with this life. You get what I'm saying? So Malcolm was kind of mad that Alex wanted to know, wanted him to not talk about that and to talk about his upbringing and everything. But once Malcolm started talking about his upbringing, there was a real story right there. You get what I'm saying? A real story right there. And how they just, how Alex, called him all the time and, wrote different drafts on napkin paper and everything, and how they just went through this long period of writing this story until all the way until Malcolm was assassinated. Okay, and there's 4 extra chapters of this book that never was never made it into the actual book, because I guess they were too controversial or something like that. So they were actually auctioned off once Alex Haley died, which Atala talks about also in the foreword, how this original manuscript of the book was auctioned off, and she felt like her family should have had the rights to those chapters in the original version of the book. But I'm like, you called Alex Haley a godfather, and he asked you to write this forward long time ago, back in 1992, and you're just now getting to it in 1999. Why didn't he give you those 4 chapters? Why did he give your family those 4 chapters? I want to know. Might not ever find out why Alex Haley never gave Malcolm's daughters and his wife the 4 extra chapters that he had in his house, or even put it in his will that they have those chapters, or he had the original, give them the original manuscript. Okay, so I actually went on Spike Lee's website, because Spike Lee sells merch. His 1619 merch that I actually want to buy the shirt, not the hoodie. The hoodie is nice, but I'd rather have the shirt. But the shirt was sold out. But I go on Spike Lee's website periodically and look at different stuff he has on there, because I always wanted like a hat or something like that, a hat or a shirt of his merch. I like his merch, so I always go on there periodically to shop around, look around. So, but I actually found on his website for $25 the trials and tribulations of making of Malcolm X. So I had to buy this book. I literally had to buy this book after getting those gems from Atala's foreword, the Malcolm X book, and reading a little bit that I've read from Wikipedia. So I'm like, wow, this is just another piece of the story, is hearing Spike Lee's version of how he got to become the director of this movie. And this book is incredible so far. I started reading a little bit of it, but I haven't gotten really deep with it, because I'm actually reading something else right now. But Spike, I'm losing my train of thought with this. So the book, when I saw the book, I was like, okay, I have to have this book. It was like $32 altogether with taxes and everything. It was $25. I saw it on Amazon. It was on Amazon too. I didn't even know this book existed, y'all. So I'm like, okay, I gotta get the book. And it has an introduction written by Terry McMillan, which is crazy. And then it has the actual story of what happened, which I haven't gotten into yet. But I'm just talking about how, me skimming the book. So it has the Terry McMillan. Ho. All right. So I'm at work right now, so some stuff just went down. So I had to pause it for a second, come back and go back on it. So I don't remember where I stopped at, but yeah, Atala, his daughter, was talking about the trials and tribulations and everything going on with the movie, and how it took a long time. You know what I mean? That was like the ending of the forward. You get what I'm saying? That was the ending of, don't ever quit on your goals or your dreams, because sometimes it takes a long time for them to come to life. Because look how long it took the movie to come to life. The goal outlived, this idea outlived Baldwin, outlived Arnold Pearl, outlived It outlived Alex Haley. None of these people got to see this story become a film. Okay, so just I mean, Alex Haley wrote Roots. I mean, and then he wrote the Malcolm X book that later became a film in what 1992, 1993. I didn't even get to see this stuff come to. But he got to see Roots, thank God, but he didn't get to see Malcolm X story become the movie. And we have to talk about um okay, well, let me keep going with Malcolm X's story right quick, and then I'll drive into black biopics, okay? Because we got a black biopic coming out in February 12th, somewhere around there, with Fred Hampton story, and it's just so funny because I started reading the Fred Hampton story back in 2020, the whole book, because I didn't read the whole book. I didn't read the whole book before then. So Malcolm X, I read the forward of his autobiography, blown away by Tyler, what she wrote in the forward, and how that her dropping the gems of how it took so long for the movie to come to life. Then I started digging up the information on Wikipedia, and then I found a book, the book, of what Spike Lee had to say about the tribes and tribulations of him putting the movie out and him becoming the director. And then I'm going to make another video on that because I wanted to know that's the puzzle pieces that I'm missing to the whole story about how it took, why did it take so long? Why were there trials and tribulations, and how he even got in his hands to become the director of the film? Okay, and so then I started when I read the chapter one of Malcolm X's autobiography. I was blown away by that chapter because it just said so much to me about so many different things, and specifically his mother's life. And I have to get this out. This is the main objective of this is what sparked why I wanted to make a video about this in the first place, and why I wanted to talk about Malcolm's life in the first place. When I started reading about his family, the foundation of who he was. Okay, so when I read about his father and how Malcolm and his father are two people that are just identical to each other. Their lives are so similar. Like if you think about how Malcolm was a minister and his father was a minister for Marcus Garvey, but Malcolm was a minister for the Nation of Islam. And then in the first chapter, Malcolm talks about how he already knew that he was going to die by violence. Okay, so even though his father and four of Malcolm's uncles were killed by violence, by white men. Okay, one of his uncles was shot by police. One of his uncles were lynched, and his father was put on train tracks. Okay, and so Malcolm said, "I know I'm going to die by violence. I know I'm going to die by violence." But Malcolm was shot by a sawed-off shotgun by a black man. Okay, so and you got that information from who killed Malcolm X on Netflix. So that's on Netflix. So you just think about his dad, his uncles, and how him and his father were just identical type people. Their lives, his childhood, everything. Like his father and Malcolm was identical. Like they were like one of the same type of people. Um, and so I could definitely talk about that. Well, then you could talk about his mom, and I really wanted to talk about his mom because his mother's life touched on so much for me, and because this was a woman, as I said in my first rough draft video, 34 years old, left with seven or eight kids. Don't hold me to numbers because it's a rough draft video. When it's polished, I want to give you the exact numbers, exact dates on everything, but I'm going based on memory. So his mother was left alone with 8 kids by herself when her husband, the Reverend Earl Little, was killed by the Black Legion, the Klan, and in the great around the time of the Great Depression. Okay, this Great Depression was like in 1929. His father was killed in what 1933, and so the 34-year-old woman left with 8 kids, and she only got one life insurance policy. She wasn't able to get the second based because of racism, because they said that he killed himself, which is not true. And so this his mother his mother's life says a lot to me about why big government is needed, why government intervention is needed, and how the negotiations with policy of who's worthy of help and why we need life insurance and um, the Great Depression of 1929. Because when we think about the COVID and the pandemic and how they're negotiating things and everything, how this stuff really affects people's lives, like how it, like this is just a direct case study of how big government or government intervention could have helped this family. And Malcolm even says that at the end of chapter 1, that like the government messes up your life. Like he if you just read this one chapter of the book, it blows you away when you think about it, because I really felt so I really felt like crying for Malcolm at the end of this chapter, because he's like, I hate how the government messed up my family. How they just, they did my mother bad. Like they did her bad, and they didn't even look out for us when they could have. They did not. They ruined they broke up my family. And how when his mother was put in Kalamazoo because she was losing her mind because of what was going on. She couldn't handle all of the kids and the financial situation. She couldn't handle it. And so she was just starting to lose her mind, like her psychological, her mind was going, she was losing it, y'all. She was losing it. And, she couldn't get that second life insurance policy. And we got to talk about these things. Like, we got to talk about life insurance and how racism plays a part in that. And how his mother tried to get jobs, and she couldn't get jobs around that time once they realized she was a black woman, because she passed for white. But once they realized she was black, she couldn't get jobs. Okay, you talk about that, and how we need government policy, y'all. We need government policy. We need this stuff to be enforced for life to prosper. Okay, who's worthy of help? Life insurance, big government intervention, Great Depression. When they talk about the pandemic and they talk about all these businesses closed and they talk about all this stuff going on, they have to reflect back to the Great Depression, because the economic system is out of whack, just like back then. You get what I'm saying? So we have to talk about how this stuff really crushes a family, especially like, if you could think about it in today's time, if a mom has that many children, or almost equal amount of children, and the father catches COVID, and he's the primary breadwinner, and he catches COVID and dies, and let's say you don't have a life insurance policy, you can end up in the same situation Malcolm's mother was in. You get what I'm saying? This is why you need to pay attention to what's going on with government, what's going on with the different policies, and be abreast of these shit and all of this stuff, because this stuff affects us directly and has been affecting us directly for a long time. And this is the epitome of this. This can, like, we can always go back and forth in history and read about this type of stuff happening. You get what I'm saying? And how this stuff affects families and affects how what happens because once Malcolm's father was assassinated and his mother, you know, started going downhill psychologically, then all of the children got put, got spread out, got put in different foster homes and different stuff like that. And I mean, it's just a lot to talk about. It's a lot to talk about. It's definitely a lot to talk about. It's a lot. I'm out on that.